The death of 23-year-old Quentin Deranque continues to shock France. Police have actually launched a murder investigation. Let's get the analysis and bring in Renaud Foucart, economist from the University of Lancaster. Renaud, pleasure to have you with us as always. Do you think the fact that the politicians in government are now actually pointing the finger of blame, kind of preempting the investigation, what is this saying about France today, do you think?
This is something pretty new. France is Europe, and in Europe, generally, political murder is generally seen as terrible by everyone, and you try not to pinpoint the finger at a specific party. So here, there is two things that are, I think, quite new. The first thing is that everyone is pointing at Mélenchon's party, so clearly the people who did that, we don't know yet who they are, but clearly they are somehow in the realm of the far left. And the second thing is that Mélenchon himself is not the kind of person who is very good at saying, this was terrible, whoever did that is terrible, and if they are close to me, I am against them. No, that's not the way he is. The way he is counter-attacking, and so at the moment he's saying, they are all lying, they're trying to get me. And so he doesn't manage to get through the message of unity that should definitely be the one that brings peace in a country like France if you don't want political violence to go further.
Because fundamentally, Renaud, what we're seeing here is the death of a person, regardless of their political views or anybody else's political position. This is the loss of a life. That is something that needs to be acknowledged and needs to be investigated.
This is a 23-year-old. We're talking about someone who, yes, you will hear a lot of reports that he was part of far-right movement, which is probably true, but at the same time, this was not someone with a history of violence. This is not a story of people fighting to death. This seems, according to what the law officer told this afternoon, this seems to be a story of several people joining to beat a single individual and who ended up killing him. And this should be the focus of everyone. How did this happen? What will be the consequences? And nobody has been arrested yet, so we don't know much more now, but this should be a moment of unity and of trying to think, how did we get there and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again?
One can talk about the issue of freedom of speech. If such an event at Sciences Po Lyon hadn't been programmed, perhaps there would have been the protest outside which led to the situation that happened. But then again, everybody needs to have the right to say what they want to say. And if someone like Rima Hassan, the politician in question, is going to speak, she has the right to be there. They have the right to invite her there. And this should be how things are allowed to progress, is it not?
Absolutely. And this happened in a time of, I think, unprecedented polarization in the media in France. So France used to be a country with relatively polite media. And in recent years, you have had a lot of media bought by Vincent Bolloré, which has a large media empire, which tried to push views that used to be seen like Fox News of the French. And so people like Rima Hassan, people like the associate of Jean-Luc Mélenchon are generally presented as evil there. And so there has been clearly, from that part, pushing of whenever someone like Rima Hassan speaks in public, it should be banned, there should be demonstration against her. And then on the other side, there is clearly a diabolization of people around the traditional Catholic in France, and someone like him seems to have been seen as a legitimate target by people. And this is, of course, something extremely scary. But see, in the end, if you cannot have people express different ideas in politics, and if it leads to violence, you are in deep trouble.
A clash of extremes, then, Renaud, is what we're seeing in France, and an increasing division among society, as you pointed out, I think quite rightly, stoked by certain parts of the media that choose to, in terms of how they debate the issues, in terms of how they present the issues, present it as a very extreme choice, black versus white, far right versus far left. And in one way or another, if you choose one, then you are less of a human being than the other. This is part of the poisonous aspect that is actually affecting French society right now.
This is something that might lead France toward a dangerous path of being like the US, when there is political violence, when someone is killed, being demonstrators in Minneapolis, being Turning Point's leader, Charlie Kirk, all those people, the first reaction is it my team, is it the other team? But this is not meant to be like that. I live in the UK. We had very big events of political violence. During the Brexit referendum, Joe Cox, a Labour politician, was murdered. A bit later, David Ames, a Conservative politician, was murdered. There were political murders, but immediately there was a sense of unity. This is something that everyone condemns, and we don't play political games with that. I think today it's very important that everyone takes that moment of reckoning to say, we don't want to become a society where political violence is a game where you belong to a team or another. No, this is a moment of reckoning. A young man has died. There is no excuse for that. Whoever did that needs to be found, convicted. If anyone is responsible anywhere in the political realm, of course, responsibilities should never be avoided. But this is not a political game. This is a young man's life.
Do you feel, and you've mentioned the role that the media has played, and you've spoken about Vincent Bolloré and his media empire. He is a far-right sympathiser. It's on record. We're not at any risk of saying that. It's actually something he stated. That kind of media ownership is weighing on one part of this argument. Do you feel that the members of the government actually getting involved and speaking out, say, as Gérald Darmanin has gone and done, this is something, again, that is inflaming the situation? Would you appeal on the government to be, I don't know, to show a bit more restraint, a bit more kind of, be a bit more judicious in how they form their opinions and express them?
This is particularly important because they haven't told us anything. Like, up to now, the only thing we know is that there was the conference of Rima Hassan. Some people met on the margin, Nemesis, or a far-right collective of women who peacefully demonstrated against that. There was a counter-demonstration. There was some mild violence around there. This is on record. The rest is told by the law enforcement officer. They say there were those people beating the young Quentin. And all we know is that we don't know whatever the link they might have with politics. And so the government going in front of the camera and doing that, it's really reminiscent of the US saying, Democrats killed Charlie Kirk. You don't want to say that. You don't want to say that. And if you know something, then you need to say it. But no, Gérald Darmanin, of course, is playing with fire here, as every single politician who is doing anything else no than showing empathy.
And is the greater problem here that this will actually serve to make worse other divisions within French society? One can think of how anti-Semitism is on the rise. One can think of how perhaps how Muslims are targeted. People who aren't white are targeted. Is this going to perhaps make things even worse in all those fields?
Or it could be a moment where people realize, like, I'm not a pessimistic person. I think, again, France has been watching what happens with within the US and has seen, I think it's pretty clear that they don't want to end up there. And the fact that this young man was not, it seems, part of a cycle of violence himself. It was a very traditionalist Christian who was part of, far right-wing people who might read books or do demonstration, but it was not a story of political violence, vendetta. It seems, from what we know so far, you may have this moment where everyone thinks, oh, okay, we are all humans. And this is something that has happened in the past. You are right to mention that in recent time, when there is an event of anti-Semitic killing, you might have a bit of a sense that, oh, they're not our team. The same with killings of Muslims, the same of everyone who is not on your team. But those things are generally quite abstract. It seems that here you have a young mathematics student who was killed during a strong political debate, but something that everyone would argue was totally unfair, undeserved, horrible. And if this moment can show to the French that they are one society with human beings living together, and yes, they can debate, yes, they can disagree harshly, but no, nothing justify political violence, I guess that's my hope, is that those kind of events can bring that kind of change of mentality.
That bringing it back to a sense that debate, genuine debate, can be achieved, genuine argument can be achieved without resorting to violence, without picking on people in that sense. For instance, the aspect of his faith, being a Catholic, automatically being associated with being far right. I mean, my experience of people who are Catholic is that they weren't far right. They were actually socialist or centre left or some kind of expression like that. It all depends on one's personal experience. But what we're finding today more and more is that particular labels are being put on people in a particular way, which is incredibly harmful to society in general.
It is, and also there seem to be, again, those reports are absolutely uncertain right now, but it seems that he was associated to some movements that were involved in far-right actions, or action directe. This is not something as innocuous as going to church, but even there, no? And also, the fact that people use faith as a way to identify politically is something dangerous everywhere. And the fact that Catholics sometimes themselves, people who are far right, identify themselves in public as the only defender of the true faith is something that the Catholic Church itself has been relatively good those days as fighting. You know, all those Catholics, the person they hate the most seem to be the Pope. So in the end, again, there is hope that the institutions are relatively resilient. But yes, you can be a Catholic. Lyon is a city that is very famous for having a lot of those traditionalist Catholic. You can be a traditionalist Catholic, like you can be a fundamental religious person who doesn't bring it into the realm of political violence, and you should be allowed to live your life freely, without violence, without pressure. France is a city that protects religious freedom, that doesn't want to have it imposed to people in society, but part of the secularism deal of laicity is that you should be allowed to live your faith, and this is true, of course, also for traditional Catholics.
Renaud Foucart, lecturer in economics at Lancaster University, up down the northwest of England, a place I know extremely well and is dear to my heart. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Thank you for bringing your voice and your particular reason to this story, which has distressed many people. And when you consider what it's about, put all the politics to one side, put all the extremes to one side, it's a 23-year-old young man who's lost his life in violent circumstances. And that is a tragedy for his family, for his friends, and for everybody concerned. And a tragedy for France too. Renaud Foucart, as always, thank you, sir, for joining us. Pleasure to speak to you.